Alright, so I'm going to record this video. I've been studying Tetronic theory for 10 years. Took me 9 just to get caught up on the terminologies in order to interpret what I was looking at. That's how busy life was. Took all my free time and put it towards physics, trying to understand the language of physics. And I realized that you had to learn math in order to understand physics. Okay, so you have to learn some basic math skills. I broke math down into variables and operators. Then I determined that you had to know certain things, like the laws of physics, so that you could interface new operations with it. New operations being the ones shown in Tetronic theory, like mass equals big M by the speed of light squared. So putting a number to a word, to an object property, is essential. Neil deGrasse Tyson says you can't do it. He says it's a long disproven failed idea. I think fundamentally people have failed for a long time to get it right, but the nature of the logic proof of the simplex, the logical deduction of the definition of matter, and how I applied it to the simplex geometry, and my proof, which I'm going to post, clearly says that we can do a bottom-up approach of mathematical physics using the geometry as the grammar of the math. Now, Wayne Roberts did some research on this. There's some other people, Pythagoras, that did research on this, but like I said, Neil deGrasse Tyson says that the Pythagorean philosophy of imbuing an object with meaning by assigning a number to it is false. However, I think that is the result of what Stephen Wolfram just came out with about 2 weeks ago, and the premise that because of quantum uncertainty, that is computationally irreducible. However, we can do hypothetical thought experiments of a singular electron moving through space, or a singular boson, or a photon, whatever it may be, and using these mathematical rules, we can determine the nature of their simulation. All right. I don't think that means that T-theory is a failed idea, and even somebody said that there's not really any point to measure, a point to try and model things at this scale, because it's not going to be, you're not going to be able, by the time you've performed the calculations, the system will have changed and your result will be meaningless. Well, I thought that quantum entanglement was supposed to solve that problem. I thought that quantum supercomputers were supposed to solve this issue. Excuse me now. But I'm no computer scientist anymore. I'm just just my little theoretical physics self-talking here. I dropped out of computer science school, okay, in order to pursue T-theory. And now I'm telling you, if I'm in a video talking, that means that, I feel like I got some cards in my hand, and those cards are the T-theory materials. And I think that people need to understand the importance of Principia Geometrica V3. The first revision was the geometrics, the second revision was the dimensional analysis, and the equivalencies. The version 3 is the real deal. We're talking a full text, mathematical, chemical notation proof that is mind-blowing. Absolutely, truly scientific enlightenment in a book. We've got a lot of discrepancies that need to be resolved between the old way and the way of Tetryonics, the new way. But that doesn't need to put off anybody. It doesn't need to, disappoint anyone that things were wrong. Now, why I believe that is that people, for example, Einstein was constantly working in C cubed space, Minkowski space, I think it's called. And Kelvin Abraham rectifies that we need to be working in, c to the 4. That's not, perhaps isn't Einstein's fault. Einstein's constituents would probably have laughed at him if he tried to work in C4 space of the sun. That's just how things go. Now, people say that science advances one funeral at a time or whatever. But it's been 10 years now of Tetryonics, and I'm starting to see why that is. People are caught up in the busyness of their lives. They're caught up in their daily obligations. They're caught up in their regular work. Now, some people have very specific work. Some people have, they're teaching rooms of students. They're constantly doing things that aren't necessarily trying to, determine the difference between C3 and C4 space. That's just not something that crosses most people's minds. Theoretical physics has kind of gone out the window because of peer review. And in order to get articles peer reviewed in modern science papers, you have to perform an experiment. You have to have observable results so that people can verify the science. This has caused a problem for T-theory because T-theory doesn't have any actual replicable experiments that I know of, despite the fact that there are some hypotheses for how we could create an experiment to test T-theory. I don't know of one, that's could be accepted in the mainstream. Anyone could point out and be like, hey, look at this. So we got some work to do, like Blankenship says. And even though Kelvin Abraham has talked about some prototypes, we don't really have a working model yet for an actual physical observational apparatus for tetrons or the result of a tetronic measurement. Measurement that's calculated via the tetronic equations. It's difficult to know exactly, what people are doing because I'm just one person here in my little lonely room. And I can't read people's minds. I can't be in a whole bunch of different places at once. I actually don't know what's going on. But there's one thing that I do know for certain, and it's that tetronic theory is not currently being studied by any major institution that I know of. The only institutions I know of that are aware of it are like MIT and Queensland in Australia, which both rejected the principles of Tetryonics, probably based on the logic of Neil deGrasse Tyson, where he's sourcing his logic from. We're going to have to get through these hurdles of resistance, bias, not necessarily cognitive dissonance, but just the conditioning, not even indoctrination, but just, people have been pounded with the belief that you cannot assign a number to, matter. And I think that's fundamentally fallacious in itself. Quantum foam theory is constantly talking about particles appearing and disappearing. And it's like, well, where did the mass that created those particles go? And, what is energy and mass? Like, what are these things? And if you look back at the definitions for all these terms, start analyzing the standard international units, start looking at the definitions of volume and matter and things like that, you'll find that you can make some determinations. Now, this is just this is the first draft. Okay. You can make determinations like this. Alright, so there's the definition of matter right there. Okay, and there's my logic. Ooh. Yeah, I'm a mess, but that's just what it comes to when you're doing this kind of research. Yeah, I've spent hours and hours every day just going through it, and the most important thing that people need to understand when it comes to tetronic theory, one, is that it was created by Kelvin C. Abraham, all the way back in 2008. He's had this information for years, and it's only just now starting to come out. I only just now have started to really understand the gravity of what I'm working with. And that is that this can advance every major field of science. We're talking math, physics, chemistry, biology, cosmology, everything, computer science. He's got slides on P versus NP. Huge. Everything, every page of Principia Geometrica is huge. And he is truly the hardest worker of our time in theoretical physics and the pursuit for the theory of everything. Einstein would be proud of Kelvin Abraham. So would all the others. He stands on the shoulders of giants, but to be honest, they would all have trouble holding him up. I mean, that what Kelvin Abraham has done, the gravity of it is overwhelming. He has solved every major issue that exists in the math and the physics. The dimensional analysis and the equivalencies are the two most important things that people need to understand. Especially the equivalencies. Alright, when you're studying the two-dimensional field mechanics, it's not so bad just to say in c-squared space, but once you start messing with big M and you're going to c to the 4, it gets a little bit interesting because, to be honest, I haven't identified the transition algorithm for a 2D mass energy field, a 4 pi field into a tetron yet. So that's one of the things that I'm working towards, is trying to understand how the weak force works in comparison in the 3D aspect versus the 2D aspect. So I think that the 2D, fields have to have their own force where they, connect in the three-dimensional space, but then you've got the three-dimensional space topologies connecting via the strong force and the weak force. But I think the weak force is still responsible just on 3 edges for connecting the tetrons one to the other, but there's no three-dimensional topology surrounding it, so the force still has to be different. That's what we're talking about. In the concept of a unified force equation, I haven't got deep enough into T-theory to determine whether or not one exists. General force F equals ma I don't think is the same as describing the forces of, the strong and the weak nuclear forces, because those are nuclear forces. I'm not sure what force. He was talking about the Evans photoelectromagneton. Yeah, I haven't determined the force that bends light, folds the bosons up to make them into a tetragon. So there's still much work to be done here, even though people are like, oh, well, what's the point in studying it? Like, Kelvin Abraham's already done it. People can just use it now. It's like, no, look, we have no actual material on, the meta-ontology of T-theory, and that is, the unified field equation proof that I'm writing, for example. We need an ontological description of the equation, like with a legend, like where tau equals, where pi equals radians, where, permeativity and permeability equals something, where mass equals something, so you need a legend in order to determine all the variables. And the operators speak for themselves. It's not like there's any summations or integrals in there. But once you start playing around with the movement and superposition of the fields, the superposition really is a Fourier transform. And then Diego's talking about, Diego Borges Rivera is talking about the area under the curve of measurement and people not knowing the tessellation of it, and so I'm studying the simplicial honeycomb right now in order to determine that. Um, there's just a lot of things, because for the idea of free space, and then the idea of a field of energy that pre-exists, like in a vacuum space. It's not a perfect vacuum. It's permeated with these light cones and all of these other, GEM and KEM fields when matter's moving through it, like an asteroid and stuff like that. Planets moving around generating KEM fields, I reckon, and GEM fields. And then obviously BEM fields, the rest molecules that are being created from the 2D energies that generate the gravity are, fields that exist on Earth. So the relationship between that, the emergent property of fields. Okay, so we've got basic 2D energies that form 3D matter topologies, which form resting molecules. So that's the emergence of matter into life right there. Because he says that the BM fields are essentially rest molecules or masses, and that's what imbues them with life. And then when we exist in our bodies, we convert 2D analog signals into 3D matter topologies in our body, in the junctions, biological junctions in our bodies. So that is right there, the nature of Kalia. Whenever you feel something, it's the result of the gravity differential created from your current primary resonance. I've read a lot of books, I never read a book all the way through, it seems, but Elegant Universe, the Universe in a Nutshell, for example. I read reading a statistics book, and some other things, but I always end up coming back to Principia Geometrica, because it just seems to be now in version 3 the only source of information besides Wikipedia that you need to make any kind of determination about the universe. It is imperative that people understand that Kelvin Abraham, is the creator of this work. He solved for dark matter, he solved for dark energy, he solved for virtual particles, he solved for there's no such thing as a black hole, blah blah blah. Okay? Black hole is just a star. Yeah, I knew that a long time ago. The point is that he redefines what a black hole is for people, makes it clear. It's so much material to go over, you can't possibly understand it in one YouTube video or one paper or one anything. You can understand some basic truths that end up accumulating to a grand image. And this is where I wish I had an image of emergence, because understanding T-theory is the ultimate emergence of information in my knowledge. If you look on my website, you'll see there's a graph of information, a bunch of little dots, and then knowledge is a bunch of lines between those dots. And I had a picture of emergence where it was like a bunch of pixels, that were black and white and pixelated, and then it resolved itself eventually into an image of a gorilla that you could see with color and shapes and stuff like that. But Tetryonics allows you to get an emerging image of the universe. Emergence of knowledge from that allows you to see down, to a level that you otherwise couldn't imagine. And it's a super impressive framework. Even though right now the work is strictly hypothetical, I think that Berkeley Labs electron microscopy, or whatever it was they were doing with the Wagner crystals, definitively proves the tetrahedral topology of the electron field, and that this needs further investigation by expert physicists. Me myself, I have been working on this for many years, but I dropped out of school and I ain't got a job, so I've just been working towards trying to see whether this is something that people should be interested in, and I've determined that it absolutely is. The unified field equation is dimensionally consistent. It matches up with all known laws of physics and geometry, and it pretty much goes in a gigantic circle of equivalency. And it's brilliant, elegant, beautiful. It's beautiful. Kelvin Abraham has done a good job. I commend him for his work. His effort is insurmountable in comparison to anything I've ever seen before. Just the 1,400 pages of version 3 principle alone is absolutely incredible. He's made hours of video lectures, hundreds of pages of previous material, thousands. The artwork is amazing, the math is amazing, the teaching is amazing, the lectures, it's all brilliant. He's a really kind, decent person. Gives as much time to me as he can afford, and I just want it to be known that Einstein's dream has been completed, and I'm sure that we've got a lot more work ahead of us. This is not the end of science. It's not it's the end of the scientific dark ages of the uncertainty principle. We can now go forward into a brighter future where we can know, down to a point, we can reduce computations to springboard scientific research to a level that allows for a different type of civilization. And so I just encourage people to look up the Tetronic materials, look at my website, that you can find all the Kelvin Abraham stuff linked from there. Luminal Mind, Richard Blankenship, there's so many others in the past. Diego with his AutoCAD, absolutely huge to the research. I wish I had a list of names. I need to come up with a list of names of people that have contributed. Names that come to mind are Johann Oldenkamp, Stephen Murphy. I've seen. We even had a guy named Ray Zeitgeist on YouTube. Alright, I don't know his name, but hey, he's one of the forerunners of T-Theory. We've got a lot of things to do. I've got to write a proof on the field equation. I've got to differentiate the 2D to 3D matter topology matrices, how to convert a 2D matrix into a 3D matrix, what kind of transform you need in order to do that. You need a simulation of the projection of KM fields from a moving positron or electron or something, same as with the KM fields from a moving boson in a photon. See how that works. Need to have simulations for that in order to see it with my eyes, with the color changing triangles and everything. The nature of Kalia in the gravitational field. My research on the analog to digital feedback loop of the brain of the prefrontal cortex layer 5 pyramidal neurons, making the final decision on the input of all the signals that are coming from the rest of the brain. Alright, so the output is in hertz, which I think is actually a digital signal, which can be read the same as if you flip Braille sideways and tried to read it 101010, so you have a square wave of movement. Move or do not move. That's how you move your vocal cords. That's how you move, your hands and stuff. There's just amplitude associated with the saw wave, and that's why you shake as well, because it's a saw wave, I think. Or it may be a curved saw wave. The movement when you look at it, but the actual signal itself, I think, is a saw wave that's offset by forces, gravity, and such kinetic energy. So whether it turns into a digital, I don't know. That's just how I interpreted it. It was an analog to digital converter. All right, and then so we have the 2D mass energies in the world, the photonic signals, the sound, everything is analog signal coming through, and these frequencies go into your brain. They superposition, they create a Fourier transform, and then they go get processed in the brain and get output as this signal of move or do not move. Okay. And so the higher frequency the signal, the more powerful it is. So if you hug somebody at 7 hertz, it's perfect. If you hug them at 30 hertz, it might hurt them. If you hug them at 100 hertz, you're going to, break something. You know what I mean? Yeah. Gotta be careful with your hugs. But the Tetryonic theory allows us to determine the nature of what is going on here with the action potentials and the microtubules, the signals that are being sent, and the junctions in the biology that are causing the transition of 3D mass energy topologies, 3D topologies into converting into 2D mass energy signals in the junctions, and vice versa, creating a gravity pressure differential in the primary resonance of the BEM, GEM, KEM field of the body, and the standing EM field of the body. The regular, BEM and EM. Yeah, I gotta be careful with my terminology. That's why you need to go watch 0002 Tetronic terminology. Okay. But anyway, we got huge research on the nature of the universe. So Robert Edward Grant posted a video recently. Now I know somebody doesn't like him, but I'm telling you, whatever research that he had that he output in one of his latest videos was huge, about the pixels and the keys and octaves and stuff like that. Huge. Tetronic theory validates all of it. Unfortunately, I heard that some people don't like him, but take it with a grain of salt that there are some answers in that video. So we have the signals and the consciousness, the feedback loop of consciousness, apiosis, the apiotic machine, abiogenesis, the work that just came out today about we call it autocatalysis. Autocatalysis, really big one. I can't remember who published that, but it's on my website under the emergence theory section. It says autocatalysis is important. So we're going to explain all those things, the self-replication, how the origin of life, the Kalia of the gravity differential. So Kelvin Abraham goes on to talk, and with Richard Blankenship and some of his conferences that he's held, talks about anti-gravity technology, talks about faster than light communication. It is also known that you can have energy move faster than the speed of light. Speed of light is not a limit. It's just the natural velocity of energy in a vacuum. And there's no perfect vacuum except the center of the tetragon, so studying epsilon and mu and their subscripts is very important. Just in general, this video is going on to be 30 minutes now, so I'm going to try and get off of here, but I just want people to know that we have a huge era of scientific understanding coming because of Kelvin Abraham, and all it takes is just the mainstream acceptance, people to start using the works in the lab and stuff like that, or somebody can tell us how he's wrong, because so far I can't find it, I can't see it, I don't know what Neil deGrasse Tyson is talking about, I don't know what anyone is talking about when they say, that these ideas are not valid. I think there's 1,400 pages of proof that says that it is valid, but this is why we make videos, so we can put it up there for the community to decide. And don't take my word for it. Go read Kelvin Abraham, Principia Geometrica. Alright, so this is James Michael Moore signing off right now. Got work coming soon. The unified field proof. Gonna have the explanation of qualia and consciousness and all that kind of stuff.